Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Very happy to have Savan Aram on with us today, doing webinar presentation about monetization and VR, and he's going to share his views and what the opportunities are. I had the pleasure of meeting Savan a couple weeks ago in Boston at the MIT AR in Action conference, Augmented Reality in Action conference. It was a very great conference, and remember we having a very good conversation. Very brief background about Savan. Savan was born and raised in Israel, and he served 4 years as a military officer in the Israeli Defense Forces. He has a Bachelor of Science in Software Engineering, and he's started two companies in the past, one of which has been sold. And he has also earned his MBA from Harvard. Most recently, Savan was the general manager at River Studios, which is a VR production company based in San Francisco. And just recently, he was the general manager at Upload VR. And today, Savan is working on a new augmented reality startup that he's not willing to talk about just yet. Maybe we can pry it out of him today. But Savan, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please feel free to share a little bit more background if you like. And looking forward to the presentation.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning if you're on the West Coast, like I am, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I want to thank Bob for putting all this together and organizing. It's always great to evangelize VR, to talk about VR, to brainstorm with other people, and I'm very excited about the space and the opportunities that are starting to show up. A little bit about the agenda today. I'll give a brief background and context, even probably shorter than 5 minutes. Bob, thanks to your intro, and then a little bit about the state of VR, some existing business models and some future ones that we might see. I'll give you my forecast for 2017 and slightly beyond, and we'll open it up for questions. All in all, should be probably 30 minutes of talking and then 15 minutes of questions. So this, you guys have seen this or heard this from Bob. I indeed most recently worked with Upload VR, and then before that with River. That kind of gives me a different context about the space. Both companies were very outward focused, and I've seen different trends coming up and people creating in all spaces, whether it's hardware, software, content. So I could talk about that. Very quickly, River was a premium VR content studio. We got to work in sports with the Broncos and Sacramento Kings and the Sharks. In media, it was Universal and Time Inc. and InStyle magazine. And in music, you can't really see the logo there of Bjork, but then also with Coldplay and Britney Spears and the Black Eyed Peas. And the content was both 360 passive content, but then also interactive, kind of premium, high quality, top of market content for either the Rift or the HTC Vive and so on. And we could really see the trade-offs that you have to make if you're trying to distribute widely on people's smartphones, and then the quality is pretty basic. Interaction design is pretty basic because there's not really a controller that you can play with, or you're trying to go extremely high quality and to the top of the market, but the trade-off is distribution, and you can't really get a lot of people to watch it and try it. So thinking about the struggle, thinking about or the trade-offs, thinking about how to monetize it, how to price it, and I can talk about that. I'll mention this in short future later here today. And then I work with Upload, which most of you guys, I would imagine, know Upload as a media company, and they've been very successful building probably the largest AR VR focused website. But then they've recently, last year, we started a co-working space in San Francisco, and in a few months in Los Angeles will be the second one. It's a place for startup to sit and work shoulder to shoulder. You see hardware and software and content companies all working next to each other, brainstorming. There's some VR amenities in place, and it's really a great community. It's probably the closest thing to town square for VR AR. And very recently, they're starting to work on their education arm that helps developers and content creators and designers and even business professionals to think about jumping in and dip their toes in VR and building careers there. All right, well, we'll dive right into the state of VR right now. And, you're probably going to hear this in every talk about VR and AR. These are platforms. They don't have a single use case. And some of the applications that we see are music and social and live sports and games and retail and healthcare and so on. And for a reason, I put a logo of one company next to each of these use cases, but there are many more. And that goes to show that it's great to see this horizontal industry all building itself together, and all these different verticals are being populated with different startups and companies, other startups or big corporations and companies jumping in. Wayfair is a good example for a retailer that's really seeing the future and investing a lot in developing VR and AR elements to its business. The ecosystem can be broadly divided into three buckets: hardware and distribution, software, platforms and delivery, and then content. It's really interesting to see that some of the companies are doing more than one or building products and services in more than one bucket, and some even in all three. A company like Oculus is building a headset. They have their Oculus platform, and then they also creating stories like Henry and other games. Jaunt is another company that has a camera, a VR camera. They have a distribution platform, and they also create content. So, some of the players play in different realms, and it is probably harder to do so, but you have the benefit of being integrated. And I'll talk a little bit about the advantages of closed systems versus open systems, and where I see VR really, where the success of VR and AR coming from. But I do think, even though it's a challenge, there's benefits to being integrated. To quickly talk about the adoption model of technology and kind of set expectations for when this happens. Usually, people ask, we all believe this is coming. The difference is in trying to understand when that'll happen. So, kind of going back to the models, understanding how usually these things look like. On the far left, you have the innovators, a small group of people that are true passion about the technology, and most likely they are the actual inventors and creators of the technology or businesses in the space. And then you have a slightly larger group of early adopters. These are your Kickstarter people who pay $150 and $200 for something that they might see in a year and a half. You have early majority, the bulk of the people. You have late majority and laggers, right? My mom, for example, is right here in the laggers category. Usually, when I do this in front of crowds, I ask people, where do you think you're at? And it's great to see. It's interesting to see that people usually everybody skews to the left of the histogram. But these are the actual numbers. Very few people are the innovators. Not many people are adopters. And then the bulk of people in the majority, of course, and laggers. Right here, there's this gap that's called the chasm that many of you, I would imagine, heard of. And that is kind of the point in time for a technology where it's go time. It's make or break. Either this becomes kind of a widely used technology, whether in consumer or enterprise, or it shrinks or stalls or stagnates and either dies or staying the same. And I believe that somewhere in 2017, probably by the end of 2017, we will be at the chasm phase for VR, where money has been raised, companies have been built. Now it's time for enterprise to start using it in a meaningful way, and salespeople for VR enterprise companies to do a good job. And on the consumer side, we've seen the promotions, we've seen kind of you get the Daydream or you get the Gear VR free if you buy a phone, and now it's time for engagement numbers to really kick in, it will be a big testing day for VR. We all of us hope that it will make it and become widely used. Um, this is kind of the rate. Now we have a lot of data all the way back from the early 1900 to the adoption, the time that it takes for 25% of the people, right? This is for 25% adoption. So if I go back here, 25 is just the beginning of early majority here. And how long it took for those 25% to start using the technology from the first commercially available product. It goes from electricity to telephone, radio, TV, PC, internet, and phones. And what we see, there's two big things to take away here. One is that the rate is accelerating. So it takes less and less time for technology to get adopted. And that makes total sense, right? The world is smaller, quote unquote, because of globalization, because of better distribution platforms like the internet for content or for software to get shared. And it's a tighter world, it's a closer community, a global community. The second takeaway is that it still takes years. 4 years for smartphones. And smartphones, mind you, had a terrific use case from day one. It actually was, it piggybacked on the network effects of phones, not even mobile phones, just phones. The first day that you bought a smartphone, the first day you bought a mobile phone, you could call any landline in the world. And that in itself is a huge use case. Nowadays, we use the phone less and less for actual voice conversations. We text more, we take photos, we do our taxes and call a cab. But this killer app for the phone was having a voice call, and it had huge network effects. So in itself, that was the killer app, and it made the technology get adopted faster because of that massive use case. And I think VR has a harder time. That's why I'm not a huge believer in the comparison between smartphones and VR. I think VR looks more like the PC when it first started. But we can talk about that later, or if you guys want to drop a question at the end, happy to talk about that more. Investments in VR AR in 2016 were really good. 2.3 billion. The source is Digit Capital here. And most of it actually did go to Magic Leap. You can see on the left, kind of the dark blue bar is Magic Leap, both in Q4 2014 and then in Q1 of 2016. They raised $800 million, and that's kind of the biggest portion of the 2.3. But still, it leaves 1.5 billion invested, and we see the investment in other AR HMDs like Vuzix and Lumus and ODG and DACRI that got funded. We see solutions and services and video services as other kind of categories in which companies raise money. Companies like Jaunt and Weaver and game companies like Servios and so forth. So very active investor investment landscape in 2016. I think 2017 will be crunch time for these companies to actually come through on the promise. Talking a little bit, moving on to how content is distributed, and this, I really kind of developed this framework from leading River Studios, and seeing that when I joined, most of the content out there was either marketing content, companies like what was that tequila brand that did a really cool 360 video. Whatever it was, and Patron, I think. And then other companies, of course, are doing marketing. It can be for films or marketing for consumer goods and whatnot. We did a cool campaign with Birchbox. But then the other thing was user-generated content. People take the Ricoh Theta or just then these hacked together camera arrays and stitching them and putting it on the content platforms like YouTube and Viridio and Facebook and Little Star. So these two types of content, marketing and UGC, were being put on these platforms and then distributed to people's phones and tablets and whatnot. Now it was great because it was free for users, so that's good for marketing. That a lot of people wanna watch it, and if it was paid, probably not as many would watch it. And then the purpose here was maximum exposure. It was based on an ad revenue model but it really requires a large user volume to really be profitable and break even and even positive ROI. Now, a second kind of vertical or type of content that we're starting to see out there is what I call premium content, content that people are willing to pay money for. And it could be film content or music content or sports, live sports, and the platforms will be different. It will be companies like Netflix that is working on their VR element, or HBO or Amazon or all these, or Hulu, all these companies that can add a VR player to their offerings and then unlock a huge existing user base, and it will be viewed on either phones or even better devices like mobile VR, whether it's Daydream or Gear or others. It can be top of market Rifts and HTCs and PSVRs and whatnot. Now, this model is paid by consumers, or would be paid by consumers. It will be probably a VOD or a subscription-based model. We're not seeing this yet, and this is a crucial part for VR to really become. This is for consumer VR to become an industry and a business. It has to turn into a business if we want to attract the best creative people and the best business people, the best investors in the world that would put money into these businesses. It has to be profitable, and for it to be profitable, it has to be paid by consumers, like any other successful industry. Right now, all the money that I've seen out there is, or I would say most of the money that I'm seeing out there is marketing money and investor money. And that is okay for the beginning of the platform. We really need to get customers on board and pay for it. And I think mobile in itself made it a challenge to charge people money for content. I think people, and even I include myself in it, are used to paying just a few dollars at most for software or content on mobile. And when people really don't perceive VR to be much better than that, that becomes a problem. Moving on to monetization strategies, kind of the core of this talk. So it's actually a pretty straightforward thinking process. If you are a hardware company, let's say an HMD like Fove or Rift, or if you have a camera like the Ozo, if you have an input device like a glove or 3D microphone, most likely would want people to either buy it or rent it from you. And the channels for you to sell could be brick and mortar through Walmart and B&H and GameStop and all these places, or online through platforms or stores like Amazon. Pretty straightforward. We're talking about software. If you have you're doing tools for VR, whether you're building a game engine like Unity, or you're building an analytics platform like Retinad, you'll probably be using a SaaS or licensing model. People pay for seats or for access to the platform. Plugins like Nuke to manipulate content, cloud services, streaming services, applications like Iris VR that's doing real estate, probably do some sort of licensing or SaaS models to the platform. We have pay-to-play, freemium, and in-app purchases that was brought in from the mobile world, whether it's games like Raw Data. That was, I think, the first game to cross the $1 million revenue mark by Survios. And you buy Raw Data on HTC, or you can play on HTC Vive, but you buy it through the Steam store, and you pay money. It's pay-to-play. You pay money, and then you can pay. With entertainment, I put Sports Illustrated here just to show they've done something really interesting with in-app purchases, where they went out to a calendar shoot and they shot some of their models in 360, and then they integrated a 360 video player into their existing app that probably has a few, I don't know, tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people globally. And if people updated their app, they had the player built into it. So when you go in, there was actually a new VR icon that if you clicked on it, you saw the different pieces of content. Now, 2 of them were free, and then the rest of them were short clips of, let's say, a minute each. The rest of the videos were paid, $1 each. So people can get the first couple for free, and then they paid. And that really, and I spoke to a few people that did the project, and it was really interesting, really positive ROI. It was a really interesting way to see how there's some type of content or some use cases where people are willing to pay money for. So that does exist. The question is, what is that content, and how can that really be developed into the future into something that is sustainable? Now, I'm insinuating here to things that can actually go even further away and into the adult entertainment, and data shows that it's really really grew in 2016, and more and more people globally are searching for it and consuming it. Different distribution. Another model with the content distribution. The first use case would be subscription-based, whether it's Netflix or Jaunt, Inception VR, or Weaver Transport. We would imagine them charging money to have access. It could be subscription, just exactly like Netflix has, or pay to play. Whether it's location-based, like Six Flags, that are now integrating VR into some of their roller coasters. I haven't tried it yet. I'm looking forward because I'm a huge roller coaster fan, and I've heard really good things. And you also have the Void in Utah. That's a huge hangar. It's really interesting. They have a physical build-out with walls and crevices and whatnot, and then people walk around with a proprietary headset and gear in VR. So the interior of the building is actually both in physical and in virtual space, and they have people, virtually jump out of windows and behind buildings, and you can have all these interesting content built onto it. And you also have platforms such as Steam or the Oculus Store, where it's a pay-to-play. You want to buy something from them, then or you want to consume content, then you pay something, this fee, and then they reserve some of the fee, and then the rest goes to the developers, like any app store. Moving on, existing models production. That's something that I've done. So if you have a VR studio, if you want to shoot content for people, it's commission-based. Weaver and Philips and Paul, Within and Concept, they make money from commission. It's very similar to traditional video. Margins are around 20-30% if you're really good. Essentially it's a non-scalable business. It can still be a very healthy business, but it's not really scalable. And it's, from my experience, it was hard to explain to clients why it is so much more expensive to make VR content than it is 360 content. But the model was still commission. Now, we did do some revenue share models with some of our clients, and those are the two that I put here, Bjork and the Broncos, because we did have a commission element with these guys, but also to lower their risk, it was lower than one we usually took, and we took revenue share because they found a way to monetize it. So for Bjork, it was with her Bjork Digital art show that was touring all over the world, and with the Broncos, it was a few promotions that they did around game days and in one of their apps. And we use the revenue share model to lower their perceived risk, and then also to have an uncapped upside. The more people watching it and consuming it, the more money we make. We made. So that is something that people use in content creation. Some of the future models that I would expect to see, and we're already starting to see. One is e-commerce. I know a lot of people are building e-commerce right now for both VR and AR. We'll start to see more and more consumers use it, and then the model will be similar to what it's like in web. If you have an e-commerce platform that you mark up the goods, and if you have a service that integrates into e-commerce platforms, then you would charge what any technology service would charge. We will see pay-per-view elements, such as NextVR, for example, is doing a lot of sports live shows. If there's when they get good enough and when enough people have have the headsets, and a big fight is coming up, they might decide to use a pay-per-view model where you pay $9.99 to watch the fight and whatnot. And they have some really interesting contracts with Fox Sports and have unique access to being the only ones who's doing it. So that's really interesting for them. Distribution rights with films. When the film model really gets understood, when the quality of the movies will be there, and where enough people have headsets, whether it's going to be from home or whether it's going to be location based, like a cinema for VR, whatever that would look like, we would most likely see the same model that we see with films, meaning distribution rights. It can be domestically, it can be internationally, and we'll see people kind of treating that the same as the film industry. Ads with the internet, the more content will be consumed and created, then people will integrate, or rather say that when the install base, with the user base is bigger, we'll see more and more ads being integrated into products, and that will be kind of the same ads marketplace that we see on the internet. And product placement is just another idea where if I do a movie or create a game, and then this car company asks me to put their car in there to give me money to do that. That is usually kind of a side revenue. It doesn't really drive business, but it is something that a lot of people do, and they find ways to really profit from their content, especially if it's viral content or things that are widely distributed. I've talked a little bit about future models here, and I think I do want to point out it's really hard to try and think into the future and foresee what some of the companies. I mean, we can try and conceive what are the models will be. It's really hard to think about what the companies will be, and a good example is, back in 2000, if somebody would say that a company like Uber will come in, it would be a kind of futuristic view. People will hail cabs everywhere with their phones. I'm for sure didn't think that was a thing. My mind didn't really go there. It's really interesting to see not only how existing companies like IKEA will use the new medium to sell more, which they will, but it's really fascinating to think what will be new companies, completely new companies that will build their products and services in the medium, uniquely in the medium. And the next thing to think about is not only what the companies will be. I like to think about what will be this weird and funny human behavior that will be unlocked because of this new technology. And a good example is, back in 2005, let's say, you saw no one doing this. Take their DSLR and take a photo of their sandwich and then hook it up to your PC and then send it to all of your friends. That was not a use case. For some reason, unexplainable reason, we do this all the time. That is, even beyond foreseeing what that Uber will rise. Having the vision to know that people will share photos of their food is, I don't think, something that anybody could have seen. So here's my question: what's this funny and quirky human behavior that's going to get unlocked because of this new medium? Because we have the ability to create new worlds, to completely tune out of the world, be in the same virtual space with anybody in the world, or we have access to the data of where everybody is looking at. We can overlay anything on people's reality with AR glasses. I'm questioning. I'm curious to know what that is, just because of my interest in human psychology. I'll end with my forecast for short term and then slightly beyond. So I believe 2017 will be hard for VR. I don't know if you got that from my tone before, but I think most of the companies that we see today will disappear. VR gaming on the consumer side will keep growing and be strong. So the reason that I say that 2017 will be hard for VR is that we've seen very healthy investment landscape in 2016, but we have to acknowledge that the VC money is hungry money. It's hungry for growth and it's hungry for milestones. And most companies raise money for 12 or 18 months runway. And if you do that, you start to take more staff and you start to build your business and try to sell. Adoption rate that we've seen is slower than the growth rate that VC kind of forces, quote unquote. So because of that fact, or because of that, it's not really a fact, because of that um, uh, paradigm that I believe in, that uh, the adoption rate is slower than the growth rate of the companies, most companies will drive themselves to the ground. I think the way to survive is to be extremely frugal and bootstrap as much as you can, and be very extremely milestone oriented in the sense of proving out your market before trying to grow wildly. And I've seen so many companies grow beyond their means, and even though there's a lot of hype and excitement, the business fundamentals are not there yet, especially with consumer money. And I do think, like I said before, that 2017 will be a year where we need to start to see consumers get on board and enterprises get on board for that to survive. Otherwise, in a year or a year and a half, all the money that was raised in 2016 will disappear, and very few VCs will put bad money after good money. So good money after bad money. So that is kind of how I see the next 12 months. Now, longer term, I believe AR will be much, much bigger, and you probably have seen that around. And the reason that I say this is because, to me, VR, and I heard this articulation, I didn't make it, but I really loved it when I heard it, that VR will be a billion-dollar niche. And that goes to say that it will be a sustainable industry, and there are some really great cases for that. The early ones are gaming for consumer, and healthcare and real estate for enterprise, but there will be more, as I said, kind of the opening slide, with the different applications. But I will believe we will stay a niche. It will not be ubiquitous. I don't think we'll start to see people use VR in trains and coffee shops and those in-between moments that we use our mobile phones. I believe AR will be that. I believe the glasses will replace our mobile phones and will sell even more. And I believe their impact on our day-to-day life will be bigger even than the mobile phone. I believe we'll spend more hours in AR than we will any other digital medium before. And I think Apple is best positioned to take over the market. And that goes to the point I briefly mentioned before, because of the closed system. So when we compare closed versus open, at the beginning of a lifetime of a technology, closed systems are usually best to really create a unique experience and to build something that really utilizes the most of each layer of the technology stack, whether it's hardware and software and content. And we've seen that with PC when it was Apple versus Microsoft, and then with phones when it's iOS versus Android. The beginning of a lifetime, innovation comes from closed system, and then propagation comes from open systems, where more people can contribute to create stuff, and it's already there. Kind of the education is already out there, and the use cases were proven. I do think that for AR, Apple is best positioned, and we've seen all these acquisitions that they made, as early as 2011 and 2012 with PrimeSense and Metaio, and I think they're coming big. It's really hard to say. I mean, my friend Robert Scoble says this year, I would be extremely positively surprised if that'll be this year, but I'm very hopeful that will happen. To take a look, kind of a last look of how DG Capital sees forecasts for revenue for VR AR. Kind of see in dark blue on the lower left side, you see AR kind of taking the largest portion. On the right side, you see in 2020, kind of the last of the years in forecast on the left. You can see kind of a breakdown of that on the right side, and we see in AR mostly hardware, and then commerce, data, voice, and different applications, and then VR. Most of it is gaming, and then a little bit of film, theme parks, hardware, and again, extremely hard to make that forecast, but that is kind of the early seeds of what we see today. So with that, Want to thank you for tuning in, and would feel free to reach out and ping me about anything, tweet or um, follow on Twitter, and then let's open this up for questions.
Well, Savan, don't go anywhere just yet. We've got a bunch of questions. Actually, got a couple of great questions from the audience. I have a couple of questions. First, I just want to say, fantastic presentation. I was really actually very pleased and happy. I mean, I heard a couple of very insightful views and points I haven't heard elsewhere. And I think it's extremely helpful and beneficial for people to ground the market a little bit. There's still a real, as you said, it has to be a real business. There's got to be revenue somewhere. At some point, only you can only live on hype and energy for so long. Um, I've got a couple questions for you, and then I'm going to go into the audience questions. First, where do you see where does 360 video fit into this ecosystem? Because I hear a lot of people think that is VR, or is it a component VR? Um, is it its own platform? How do you see it?
I think I, I'm personally not very picky on terminology. I do want a clear terminology so we can all speak in the same language. Um, but to me, VR is a spectrum of interactivity, and 360 content is probably on the far end of having the least agency and interactivity. It's very passive. It is, to me, it is VR. I don't think, at the end of the day, I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think the question is for 360, is it a is it something people want to watch? Is there a use case for 360? Is it going to be is it going to be used for movies, for entertainment, or is it going to be used for retail? I can tell you that my brother is moving into Silicon Valley, and I went house hunting for him, and I took my phone because he asked me to take a video, but I also took my Ricoh Theta, and I grabbed 360 at the same time that I grabbed the regular video on my phone. And even though the phone's quality is much bigger, he ended up only watching the 360. You can see kind of the scale of things around you. You can look around at every, you're not reliant on somebody pointing the camera somewhere. So I think there are some use cases where it is viable. I think entertainment is harder than people thought and would take a lot of time for that. If you want to think about entertainment in 360, movies and music videos and whatnot, I think volumetric content will be really interesting. It's something I urge people to take a look into, where the entire scene is being captured in 3D and not really a flat video in 360, but a true 3D capture of a space or a scene, and the ability to walk around in it. I think there are some interesting ideas there. I think it's VR is probably on the lowest end of the spectrum.
Okay. Um, I'd be I don't know if you have any feeling or you've seen any data in terms of sales of Oculus and HTC for the last few months, not talking about all of 2016, but let's say the last 3 or 4 months. One of the things that I'm uh, feeling about as far as VR headsets and high end is it's a technical hurdle still to set up a system. It really is designed at the moment for a high end PC gamer, and it's not trivial for just a regular computer user to set up a high end gaming rig and get their headset working. I just wanted to get your own comment if you felt the same way, or if you see that is that one of the big hurdles right now.
Yeah, am I still sharing my screen?
You are.
Okay. So this is kind of how mobile phones evolved, right? Now, I think we all agree that so this is the first iPhone, right? Oh 04, I think, oh 03 or oh 04 it was. Um, it's pretty obvious we're here somewhere. It's not clear if we're here with VR. I don't know if you see my cursor. I don't know if we're on the kind of the
Yep.
bulky Motorola phones or if we're starting to push into things that are not smartphones yet. They're not really everywhere yet, but they're smaller and kind of better. Um, you know, the bulky headset on the head is not easy. Setting up the technology, like you said, is not easy. we all want to go to be here, where glasses with the form factor and heat emission and weight distribution are much better, well thought out. Just to see people get all tangled with the phone, sorry, the audio wire, it's hilarious. Even I do it. Every time I use my Gear VR, which is not very often, I get all tangled, and it takes me a minute to get out of it because, I mean, it's not there yet. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
So you've actually, this is a perfect segue into my last question, and with this slide is, looking at the iPhone there in 2005, 6, 7, is the iTunes store was really, I think, a game changer in terms of smartphone usage. Is that one of the main components missing, from the VR AR market right now?
I mean, everybody wants to be the App Store. Um, to me, that is Oculus's play, is a platform play. Um, you need to have a device for it, but I would have imagined them wanting to open it up to other devices as well, just because of Facebook is a platform. That is their core business. And I think, again, going back to my point on closed systems, that is why Apple One is having that tight integration between the hardware and the software distribution platform, having the App Store. And the story goes that Steve Jobs wanted to keep it closed. He didn't want to open it up, and then he faced such immense pressure from his board and employees that he ended up opening it up. But I think for a lot of people, that is the holy grail. You're starting to see that. I mean, you do have um, Steam or Valve doing a terrific job on their Steam platform, and they're opening up beyond HTC now, and to take additional headsets. Facebook I mentioned, or Oculus I mentioned, is doing. I mean, I think as a company, Oculus is struggling a little bit. They're not really flying as high as everybody expected. Um, in many ways, it is. There's always a proliferation of people trying to set the standard and to be the go-to place. At the end of the day, and we've seen that with smartphones. I mean, most of the companies, the big companies that we've seen in the beginning of mobile phones kind of cycle, where it's Nokia and you saw BlackBerry and everybody, they kind of went away, and now you have two major players.
So I'm going to get into the audience questions because we have some very good ones. And Craig just made a comment which I thought was useful. The industry should be focusing on smartphone VR as it has less friction to get started. I don't know if you want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that is widely regarded as mobile VR will be a huge growth engine for VR in general. We've seen Oculus now dividing themselves into two core divisions. One is PC based. That Brendan Oribe, the previous CEO, he stepped down and now he's taking over PC VR, and then you have mobile VR. To me personally, mobile VR still needs to prove itself. I'm not as bullish as I used to be on mobile VR. I think the use cases of putting on a headset are still not there. I mean, um, you know, ask yourself, not from the content creator standpoint. Ask yourself from the consumer standpoint. When and why? Those are the two biggest questions in my mind. When are you using VR, and why are you using it? Um, and if the when and why are extremely different than the when and whys of mobile phones. So when I use the mobile phone is, all hours of the day. First thing I do when I wake up, and last thing I do when I go to sleep is kind of play around with my phone. I'm sorry to admit. And the whys are emails and communication and productivity and to watch video, entertainment, and all that. With VR, the when and why are different. When is much, much, much smaller than mobile phones. I don't see people using VR. I don't think people will use VR in open public spaces so soon. And the why is a problem. I think the killer VR, the killer app is still not there. And the beginning of technology that tries to get kind of adopted, you need to have that unique use case, that killer app to get things going. We saw that with the phone. We saw that with the PC. With PC, it was VisiCalc, the spreadsheet software. So, I still haven't seen that for VR.
So, Savan, this question is from Sarah. At the moment, VR, AR gets very lumped together in the press and presentations like this one. At what point do you think they really start to be looked at and talked about as very distinct experiences?
It's a great question. I think we need to already do that. I want to show you something real quick. Hopefully, I have this here. You're totally right. There are two different mediums, and we can't really bulk them together. You can create content with the same use case for different platforms. You can create an education experience for VR, let's say the Battle of Gettysburg, and really kind of getting in there and seeing how that played out, or D-Day, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be military. I just thought of that. But also, you can have an education experience for AR, where you walk in a museum and things pop up in front of you, or you put a headset and you see a human body and you kind of start to dissect it. So the use cases can be in both mediums. Both of them are mediums. Some use cases are shared, and some use cases are distinct. I think gaming will be much bigger on VR than it will be on AR. I think there's just so many things you can do in space. To me, AR gaming will be much more like the casual mobile gaming that you see, the kind of the farm builds, and VR gaming will be much more the console gaming, where people really are immersed in MMOs or sport games and whatnot. I think the reason people bulk them together is still a lot of people still don't really understand the difference, and things like Pokemon Go and Snapchat are doing great things to really explain to people what AR is. But I think it will take time. How long? It's hard to say. I don't know. A couple of years.
So, Savan, this question, this is from Bastian. Bastian, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hello, Savan. Thank you for this comprehensive state of the VR world. How do you see monetization develop for the music industry, given that current ad and subscription models aren't paying enough for the Pandoras and Spotifys of the world, and are a loss leader category for the Amazons and Apples of the world? More revenue needs to be generated to pay for VR, right?
Absolutely. And I think, I was really bullish on creating music videos in VR. I felt like when I was a kid, MTV was a huge thing, and everybody kind of tuned in and saw the latest video from. What I found about when we started doing music videos in VR, we saw a huge potential, because there's something unique about sports and music where the subject matter in itself makes the content viral. A lot of people want to consume anything on their favorite sports team or on their favorite artist. If you're creating a documentary, it's really hard to persuade somebody to watch your film. But if you're creating anything, if you talk to a Beyonce fan, she or he will gladly watch anything by that artist. Same goes for your favorite sports team, and the virality coefficient is much higher on those types of experiences. What I did find going in is music industry is extremely hard to navigate. There's a lot of people who want to take a share from the profits, whether it's obviously the artists and then the managers, the label, and you have the issue of distribution that you mentioned. Where can people actually watch this, right? So, I think the more there are platforms, premium content platforms, like, whether it's Weaver or Jaunt from the VR world, or Netflix or Amazon that are coming to the VR world, when they start to charge money for content, or YouTube Red even, when they start to charge money, and if it really catches on, and if the content itself is exciting enough, and I think it could be, because it's another way of immersing yourself in the music. I mean, I've seen two music experiences that blew my mind from DJs that created. One of them was passive, kind of you were flown through this musical world, and you saw the music in front of your eyes, and the other one was interactive, where when you played around with the remote controls, you couldn't really affect the music, but your controls were brushes that you can paint the world with different brushes that changed with the music, and it was absolutely beautiful. But it is for a very low number of people. I think, um, I saw the report about 4.5 million Gear VRs out there, 500,000 HTC Vives, and 250,000 Rifts. So, it's still very slow. There were, I think, 750,000 PSVRs, and it's slow to grow. We need millions of people to actually have these, but it's also how often do you jump into an experience that really matters. And talking to people from Samsung, I've heard that engagement numbers are not terrific, or lower than what people wanted. When you look at the numbers of Cardboard for Google, you see the amount of time spent, some stats there, extremely low. People open it up hardly once a month, and not even to go back and see if something is new. So not only the content is hard to make, but also engagement numbers are not terrific. So we still need to find the way to create content that makes people want to watch it again and again, come back.
Yeah. Well, just a quick comment on the PSVR. I ended up buying one, right after when it came out in October. It took me a good hour to set it up, and I haven't touched it since that day. I spent, a couple hours on it, but it's there's just so much to get it up and running, and the camera has such a small field of view. You have to be very situated correctly for it all to work. It's not like just turning on the console and playing any other game.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I ended up, I have an HTC Vive from back in April, and I play it every now and again. I'm a gamer, so I also bought a PSVR for like 450, whatever it was. And like you, I didn't really touch it. I was underwhelmed by the performance of the tracking, and it lost tracking very frequently. And I ended up selling it before Christmas, secondhand for $750. So
that's
I
what I
was,
should have
that,
done.
so it made me happy at the end. Not from the platform, but it made me happy.
Right, right. You just pass the problem along to somebody else. So just finishing up our last conversation, Des just chimed in with a question on that. Do you think there's a play for independent content creators?
I do, absolutely. I think it's going to take a while for them to be able to monetize, because independent creators are reliant on either the hope of somebody picking that up and sponsoring it and distributing it for you, um, or the potential to reach large audiences. Um, and it's really hard to monetize independent content, right? UGCs. Um, I do think, I mean, there's two ways there to really create something that is unique. If you unlocked something that nobody else had before, um, and the other thing is to really kind of build yourself as a professional, then maybe do it professionally later. Um, some of the stuff that I see on Viridio is closed, unfortunately, um, because of that topic, because of that issue that you can't really, the challenge, you can't really monetize free content unless you have a huge user base. And same goes for Little Star, and they're kind of shifting to be a more premium, a more curated platform. And I see all this UGC there, and most of it is not really good. And I think that is the challenge, to be able to create something that is good and unique, and but low on resources. It's really hard to stitch, especially if you're shooting outdoors. It's really hard to compose and to do post process for positional audio if you don't have the right software. Um, and as time advances, people will see that being democratized, exactly like video editing. 20 or 30 years ago, nobody could do that. Nowadays, everybody can add video on either Windows or Mac, or there are even phones. Same goes for web publishing or web design. I mean, when I was a kid, I learned how to code HTML on a notepad, because there wasn't really software to do that in a good way. And nowadays, my wife has her website on Wix or on Squarespace. So, um, you know, always you see technology commoditize, you see tools democratizing access, and that's great. It's going to take a while for that to happen.
So, Saman, we got two more questions before we try to wrap it up. Um, why are you? This is from Praveen. Why are you so hopeful on AR? The only data point of a successful deployment is Pokemon, and that fizzled after 2 months.
Cool. So Pokemon could not have sustained its engagement and growth, right? I mean, where you're everywhere all the time, you can't sustain where you're essentially just one use case. It was a fad. It was phenomenal. It was amazing phenomena, but I agree, it couldn't sustain. And um, I remember having a team meeting when one of the team meetings that we had when it exploded and everybody was playing it, and I said, guys, this is not an investment suggestion advice, but I would short Nintendo. I would short, and it did drop after. They did made a shit ton of money from it. Excuse my French, um, but that was just one thin slice of use case for that. The reason that I'm so bullish about AR is that for the first time in history, I think we have an opportunity to make our reality contextual. And I explain what I mean when I say contextual reality. So when each of us are browsing on our either PC or phones, and we go to Facebook, it's a contextual feed. You see your friends, I see mine. When you go and search something on Amazon or you research something on Google, you see contextual results to what you've done before. But when you step out of that digital domain and you walk around in the street and you're meeting your friend for coffee, then it's an objective reality. It's not contextual anymore. You guys see more or less the same thing depending on where you're looking at, but it's more or less you're seeing the same reality. When you have AR glasses on your face, the entire reality can be contextual. We can be driving in a car on the 101 here in Silicon Valley and see a huge billboard that is not there, maybe a marker, maybe even not even that. And you can see something that you looked on Amazon earlier that day, and I see something that I Googled, the day before. So what that will do, it will reduce the cost of print and increase the cost of click-through, right? Of CPM, because in its sense that is what it is. The more you can target with advertisement, the higher CPM you have. So that is one thing that I see. I can be, I recently bought I think it was a 55-inch TV, and I remember tweeting that the next TV that I'm going to have is going to be virtual, because I can have a 100-inch TV that's not there, and I can be watching one thing, and you can be sitting next to me and watching something else on the same TV that's not there, each of us with our own glasses, or we can watch the same thing in sync. We can share a space and collaborate if we wanted to, or we can each do our own. So once your reality is contextual, you're sitting in a restaurant with me, you're looking at the menu, and you see crossout or you see calorie counter, things that are relevant to your blood sugar, and I see things that are relevant to mine, where everything is connected, if it could get connected. And it's never by itself. It's never one technology by itself making the change. It's always a convergence of technologies. The phone is not only packaging it in a mobile device. The phone is also having GPS in there and connectivity, and the touch screen. All these different technologies coming together. So the promise of IoT, connecting everything and having standards for everything to talk, and then the medium of displaying it on your face in contextual environments is the big promise of AR. To me, it's just the next step of integrating digital with our lives. We've done that with the PC. We're doing it with a mobile phone, and next we'll do it on our face. And
Well, I think what you said there, I think you hit on a key point, which I want to emphasize, which is integrating it into the rest of our lives. I think people are too hung up on thinking about AR in terms of applications, and I think it might be easier for if it's perceived as an interface. I mean, it really is just a new interface to data and displays and consuming information. And if people,
absolutely, and
it's an extension of your existing computer and phone.
so we already use our eyes to consume content, but we are slaves, quote unquote, to looking at flat screens. If you remove that barrier that you need to look at a screen, and you bring that to your uh, eyes wherever they are, that in itself removes so much of the friction. And then also the opportunity is true AR is deeply contextual, is looking at what you're looking at and bringing in data from the world, information from the world to the palm of your hands. Whether it's I hold up a product and I see its ingredients, or I see um, uh, price comparison over different platforms. Just bringing in that data
Right.
is going to be super valuable. The big question here that I don't have an answer on um, is what is the killer app for AR? And I've
So,
had these conversations, and it's many different answers to that question.
okay. So, last question from Kathy, who I've been holding on. What monetization suggestions for a marketing communications agency focusing on AR MR?
I don't really know what the difference is between AR and MR. I see it all the time, and I couldn't really get the difference. I'd love if somebody could
Okay. Well, just this
either
is
send a
one or the
comment
other. It doesn't
or
matter.
email me what they think. Um, if we're talking about marketing agency, many of the things that we've done around marketing was pop-ups. So if you go to big events or conventions or whatnot, you have an opportunity to bring high fidelity VR and AR to consumers wherever they are. AR is harder because the tech is not as impressive. The user experience is not as impressive. I mean, HoloLens is really cool, but it's pretty limited yet with what people have done with it. And then if you do it through the phone, either it's a regular smartphone or a Tango phone with the Novo. I mean, it's nice, but it's not a wow moment. VR, in my experience, is much more than that. Um, but taking it to people, doing location-based, is something that can be monetized for large brands. Um, Otherwise, if you want to distribute something, it needs to be viewed on phones, and then it kind of goes back to the debate: is this something that people would spend time watching? And that is the question. That is well, one of the challenging conversations that I had with brands is they weren't convinced with the ROI, I think, but that's what we see mostly. The most impressive things that I see is pop-ups. South by Southwest is a great way to check it out. You see kind of a convergence of every awesome big activation in VR in the same space for a week.
Well, I've got a bunch of comments, and everybody's view is different about MR versus AR. And so I think there's a lot. I think we should just stop talking about MR. I think it's just adding to the confusion.
Yeah.
We just passed our 60-minute mark. I want to wrap it up and respect everybody's time, and everybody's got busy day. Savan, really great presentation. Very much enjoyed the discussion today. I think it was extremely educational and very helpful for a lot of people. Excellent job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Audience, thanks very much for joining us today. We do have another webinar on Thursday around performance enhancement utilizing VR. Hope for you to join us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everybody.